Hey, welcome. We're going to work with the Perspective Grid tool, and I'm also going to have you hand in your work copy for this particular assignment. So you'll want to make sure that you save it both as an Illustrator file as well as a PDF when we finish this out. And we'll also work with some traditional, in a traditional perspective environment. I'll have you draw that out, but for this particular exercise, we're going to, again, work just with the Perspective Grid tool, Perspective Grid selection tool, and widget in Illustrator. So I'm going to call this Illustrator Perspective Grid Exercise. And we're going to make the orientation horizontal. And we're going to click Create. Now, because I'd worked with Perspective Grid tool previously, some of my widgets out here and a couple of other things, or not my widget, but my toolbox. So I'm going to put this back over here so you can see how we do that. Pull it out, that is. All right, so I am going to first go up to Essentials, and I am on the control bar, and I'm going to say Reset Essentials. All of the information should go back into its appropriate spot. And I'm going to zoom out here just a little bit so we can see. That's getting the zoom tool, and then clicking on Option or Alt if you're on a PC, and that means that changes it to a zoom out rather than a zoom in. You can also go down here to this little bottom facing arrow at the bottom that faces down, and you can click on that and choose what you want your artboard to be viewed at. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to do is in the toolbox we're going to look for the Perspective Grid tool, and you'll see that that's under the Perspective Selection tool, and Shift P is the quick key to access it. If you want the Perspective Selection tool, that's Shift V. And something, I'm just going to click on this little tab, and that's going to bring it out here so it can be, so I can access it. I'm going to click on the Perspective Grid tool, or Shift P, the tool itself, and you'll see immediately it the Perspective Grid is viewable along with this widget that shows what plane we're working with. Now you'll see the left plane is blue and activated. It corresponds with the blue left plane here. If I click on the second plane, that is orange, and now it's activated. You see that with orange. And then the bottom is green, and you'll see that too is activated. I'm going to go back up to the left plane, and I'm going to get a well, let's play with this a little bit, and I would always encourage that you do that. There's not anything that you can do that's going to harm it, so just make sure that you have the Perspective Grid tool selected, and this is the horizon line. And again, I'm going to have you set up a traditional perspective environment, drawing a horizon line and a ground plane, and so on and so forth, with vanishing points, special vanishing point left, special vanishing point right, in a 2-point perspective. And see that these little diamonds are what makes the grid editable. So you can increase or raise the horizon line. And you'll see that the ground plane increases the distance between the horizon line and the ground plane. You can also impact where it sits on the ground plane. Move these out as well to increase the space that's shown on the grid. Now understand that when you print, after you have completed drawing or using your typeface in perspective on this grid, the only thing that's going to print is the actual object itself. This grid does not print. And again, I would encourage you to just play with it a bit to see how you can impact the grid by working with these various options. This just changes where you see the plane or where the plane is. You can also change this side to bring it over here. See if we can move that out a bit. And again, changing the left vanishing point and the right vanishing point in a 2-point perspective on the horizon line with the ground plane here. All right, so once you get it like you want it or not, the one thing to remember is there's not anything that you can do that's going to mess up the grid. If you get it to a point where you don't feel like you can work with it, then just go up under View, down to Perspective Grid. And we will work on a 2-point perspective in this exercise, so just revert back to the 2-point perspective normal view, and it will return it exactly to where it was initially. All right, so we have the left plane activated. We're going to get the square. Actually, let's get the square rather than, or the rectangle. And we can draw it so that it is right on that left plane. If we want to be able to see that a little bit better, let's go up to the swatches panel, and you can still fill it with color and stroke it with color as well. You can increase the stroke size just like you do with a normal picture plane. And let's go again to make sure we have that selected, and this time we'll choose an ellipse, and I want to make sure that I have the right plane activated. So I am going to draw an ellipse here. Then I'm also going to draw an ellipse way out here. Maybe not there. See if we can draw it out here. All right, now the tools typically work equally well in a perspective environment as they do on a standard artboard, but let's go to the blend tool. I'm going to click on the blend tool, double click to bring up the blend tool options, and I'm going to bring this to 20. Oh, let's say 15 because we want to still be able to see the blend. And then we're going to blend the ellipses, and I'm not sure if I have to select them yet or not, but here is, yeah, I think I do. Nope, I don't. So there is the blend tool selected, and the ellipse, though I want to select it with the perspective selection tool. I don't really like the size of that stroke, so I'm going to see if I can impact the stroke. All right, I'm going to double click on this and see now it's in isolation, and it's going to hopefully allow me to reduce the size of that stroke. Or let's go to Object, Blend, Expand. And now by expanding it, it did allow me to affect a change to those strokes. And click out of isolation so you can see. Okay, now if I were to want to move that to the left plane, just click and drag. And because it's expanded, they're now separate shapes. Okay, now the other thing that we can do that's kind of cool is, and I'm going to select these and get rid of them, is to work with a typeface on the perspective grid. So I've got the regular type tool, and I am going to type Saturday. I can't even think of anything to type. Must be too late for me, huh? Type my name. At least I know what that is, right? So I'm going to highlight that and select it with a perspective grid tool. You actually don't have to highlight that at all. But and then I am going to pick the right plane, and I'm going to click and drag it to that plane. And you'll see that immediately it does, it changes it to a, okay. Immediate, it changes it to points and paths, or points, yeah, and paths rather than a typeface. So I'm going to get the perspective selection tool like it told me to, so I can increase the size. And you see that it is in perspective on the right plane. Now if I wanted to change this as a typeface, maybe I decided I didn't want the typeface or wanted to change the typeface, you just double click on that. It puts it in isolation mode, and now I'm able to manipulate it as a typeface. So I can change the type, I can change the size, I can change the color, and then again get the perspective grid tool. I'm going to do Command 0, and you'll see that it is allows me to, we want the selection tool, just accidentally put it in isolation. Okay, there we go. Now I can move it. I have to have the perspective selection tool though, not the grid tool, but the selection tool, to click, drag, and move it. And as I move it along that plane, it stays transforming in perspective. Now if I want to change it to the other plane, there are keyboard shortcuts that you can do just to change it to another, that changes it to the bottom plane. Maybe if I go to 1, and here we go to the left plane. And there you go. So your assignment is to create or just a real simple exercise. Step 1, you want to draw shapes on all 3 planes of the perspective grid. Okay, let's quit doing that. Let's get this down to a normal size. And we're going to change this to a readable typeface. Draw shapes on all 3 planes of the perspective grid. And you're going to add color, stroke, and if you want, you can add any number of things, texture, whatever, to those shapes. And then the third thing and last thing, this is a simple exercise, just add text to each plane, just the left and right of the perspective grid. Change typefaces. And size. And that's all you have to do. How easy is that? All right, so that's it. It's a great tool, but again, we're going to revert back towards the latter part of the week to our traditional perspective environment and draw again, just to refresh your memory as to what a perspective environment is, draw the horizon line and so on and so forth, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. So, great. See you later. Have a good evening.